Hello, everyone, and welcome to Great Targets, the official podcast of the Research Chair on Mistreatment of Older Adults. I am one of the hosts, Mélanie Couture, the chair older, and here is Kevin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Saint-Martin. I'm the coordinator of the research chair, so basically the right arm of Mélanie.
So, we actually already have a podcast in French, so that's why we have a weird accent. And and the other thing is that we as a team decided that we needed to launch an English version of the podcast. In French it's Cible Grise. So we see it as a way to provide reliable and readily available scientific information on mistreatment of older adults, but in somewhat a more casual format than what I actually do at the university, because I'm a university professor at Université de Sherbrooke.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
idea is to just have a chat. I know this first episode is going to be a bit more rigid, maybe, because we're going to go through a bunch of definitions, but I hope you'll stick around because the rest of it will be more conversational.
Yeah, and we do also interviews with different experts, and we present articles, scientific articles. So we have a bunch of different ways of getting scientific information through to a bigger audience, and I hope you'll watch it and enjoy it.
Yeah. So for this first podcast in English, we will start by explaining what mistreatment of older adults is.
Yeah.
Mélanie, want to go on?
And no, but the thing is, the French version, if you're interested, has been on since early 2023. So you can all, if you understand French, you can also go see the French version. And I'll be surprised the French and the English version are somewhat different, depending on the subject. So in the English podcast, we're talking about Quebec, Canada, where we're from, but we're also talking a little more about what's going on internationally. And also, we might not have the same guests. So, if our guests are English speakers, then the interview's in English. If they're French speakers, the interview's in French. And some of our guests do both. So, we have an interview in English and then we do it again in French or vice versa. So, that's important to know also. So,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. But the first thing we have to do with this podcast is explain what is mistreatment of older adults. And so, you might have heard this public health issue under a different name. So, for example, the World Health Organization used to refer to it as elder abuse, and now refers to it as abuse of older people. Of course, there's the story behind why we call it mistreatment of older adults, but that's not what we're going to talk today about.
We won't get into that.
No, but what's important to know is that definitions are somewhat different also based on culture and political agendas. So for us, for example, the definition, we're going to talk about Quebec. It's in one of the provinces, and there's 10 provinces and a few territories in Canada. So even within our country, Canada, the definition is not the same. But I'm going to start, Kevin's going to start by telling you what is the definition of the World Health Organization, which is the most commonly used.
Yeah, so this definition states that abuse of older people is a single or repeated act or a lack of appropriate action that occurs within any relationship where there is an expectation of trust which causes harm or distress to an older person.
So actually, this means that the one important thing to understand about mistreatment is it's not perpetrated by strangers. Okay, so that's important. Mistreatment is perpetrated by people in our lives that we should be able to trust. So it can be families, it can be workers, it can be friends. So that's important to understand. So it's not strangers, it's people around you that you're supposed to trust usually. And the other thing important about this definition is that it can manifest as single or repeated act or a lack of appropriate action. So this definition highlights also that it's if you do nothing and you're responsible for that person, and the person experiences harm or distress, then it is mistreatment. So it's not just about doing something that causes harm or distress. Not doing anything can also be considered mistreatment if it causes harm or distress to the person.
Another part of the definition that is important to look into is the fact that it is the single or repeated act part of it. That means that a situation doesn't have to occur a bunch of time for it to be considered mistreatment. Just once is more than enough if it causes harm. And it's easy to conceptualize when we are talking about extreme acts of mistreatment, like physical violence. In those cases, everyone pretty much agrees that a single punch is too much.
Yeah, one's
But
too much, for sure.
I hope everyone thinks that a single punch is too much. If
Yeah.
you run around punching people and think it's okay, you might need some therapy. But when it comes to less obvious things like insults or raising your voice or screaming at an older person, sometimes we hear people argue that it shouldn't count, but we wholeheartedly disagree. It's also unacceptable.
I The idea about mistreatment and talking about it in the research chair, it's about we're not judging people. Okay. The idea is we want to work with everyone so everyone can be able to reflect on their own behaviors and learn how to better interact with others. And this means little actions, being careful of not insulting people, of not screaming at people. I know if you have children, it's hard, and it's kind of about it's about choosing the right strategies not to cause harm or distress to people, and little actions that are can be considered mistreatment, and if you everything adds up, then it causes more and more distress to the person, and also the situation can also become even more critical. So you may scream one day and then you start screaming every day, and so everything can amplify with time. And that's what we want to talk about and think about to help, maybe in a way, make the world better. So mistreatment is not just about extreme cases, it's about treating each other well also. And that's the idea we have behind the podcast also.
Yeah. And we can't run around making exceptions, so we need to look at everything. And if you see something, you need to raise the red flag, even if you think it's just a small thing. If it can be considered mistreatment, try and put a stop to it.
And there is a specific definition in Quebec that actually adds a few more concept to the definition that we just talked about, the World Health Organization's
Yeah,
definition. So Kevin, tell us about the Quebec definition.
yeah, sure. I seem to be responsible for all definitions in French
Yeah.
also.
Yeah,
So
you'll see in every podcast, he's the one reading definitions. So I don't want to read them. So it's his job.
it falls on me. So
Yeah.
the Quebec definition is also the one that we adopt at the research chair, and it's similar to the one for WHO, but it has some slight difference, like Mélanie said. So our definition is mistreatment is a singular or repeated act, a word, an attitude, or a lack of appropriate action that occurs within any relationship with a person, a community, or an organization where there is an expectation of trust, which intentionally or unintentionally causes harm or distress to an adult. It shares the general idea with the definition from WHO, but it applies to all adults, not only older adults, and it highlights that it's not just actions that constitute mistreatment, but also attitudes and words must be considered.
Yeah. So the idea that it's not just action and it can be words and attitudes is really important in Quebec. So the choice of words when you talk to someone is important if you don't want to mistreat. It's also important to know that in Quebec we consider that mistreatment can be perpetrated by a person, a community, or an organization. So it's not just about interpersonal issues or family dynamics. It's also about organization that have policies or practices that causes harm or distress to people. So if organization are doing that, usually you have a lot of people who are being mistreated. So we in Quebec, we are actually doing research on organizational, or maybe you can call it also institutional mistreatment, which is not the case everywhere. So we have a government that actually recognized this concept. And is helping to do research on this topic also. If you
There's
also
also,
note, sorry,
sorry, go ahead. No, you go on.
okay, if you also notice, there is the intentional or unintentional mistreatment, which means that you can also have good intention, don't want to harm the person, but are still causing distress or harming them. Um, that means that um, when there is harm or distress to the person, it is called mistreatment, whether you or not you wanted to hurt the person. It also means that we're going to intervene differently. Usually, when it's unintentional, it's more about educating the person about the right strategies and recognizing that they are causing harm. When it's intentional, then it's more about sanctions. And in some cases, the police may be involved if there is an actual crime that's being done. So this is also important. Mistreatment is not the same thing as a crime necessarily. Some types of mistreatment are crimes depending on the legal aspects in your country or your region, but it's not always the case. But what we're trying to do by pinpointing mistreatment is trying to find solutions so we don't cause harm or distress to people. So it's not just about throwing people in jail, which is a minority of cases. It's more about improving interaction between people. So like I said, people don't always want to mistreat, but can mistreat and cause harm if they don't do the right action or don't understand the situation in a great way. So one thing to do is before doing something, just ask the person if it's okay with them to do what you want to do. Maybe the first step to ensure that you won't cause harm or distress in that way. And now I think so. This is the more general definition of mistreatment. I think in Quebec, we actually have 7 specific types of mistreatment. Kevin's going to talk about this, but what is also important to understand is that in the different podcasts we will be doing, we will be talking about how mistreatment manifests itself in specific contexts. Because this is really general, but if you want to be able to identify it, you need to know what it looks like. And it kind of changes forms or manifestation depending on the context. But we do have types that we're looking for when we're talking about mistreatment. So go ahead, Kevin.
I'll be brief because, like Mélanie said, we're going to have some episodes focused on each types. But overall, there are 7 types of mistreatment that we consider in Quebec. There is physical mistreatment, psychological mistreatment, material or financial mistreatment, sexual mistreatment, and then we have violation of rights, ageism, and organizational mistreatment, which are 3 types that are kind of more specific to Quebec and that we don't see in every definition. If
And
we
no, I
yes,
was going to say about the fact that each of them can manifest themselves as neglect, so a lack of appropriate action, or as violence, words, attitude, or gestures that cause harm or distress.
yeah. And if you want to know more about that, you can find the complete Quebec terminology on the Research Chair website. The link will be in the description or it will show up on your screen if you're watching us on YouTube. In this document, you'll find examples of mistreatment for each types. You'll find the definitions. You'll find tips on what you should watch out for to better be able to detect if a situation could be mistreatment. So I invite you to look at that and come back to us for our episode on the different types.
Thank you for joining us for this first episode of Great Targets. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. If you could share this episode, it would be greatly appreciated. We want to make a better world. So thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. See ya. Before you go, if you are in the province of Quebec, we just want to remind you that if you have concerns about mistreatment, if you believe you are being mistreated, if you witnessed a situation, or if you are a professional facing a complex situation, you can reach the mistreatment helpline by calling the 1-888-489-2287. It's a provincial helpline that is fully bilingual and available 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So 1-888-489-2287.